They had scrubbed the air to a bright, clinical purity that took all the smells of living out of it. A row of pale curtains stood like dutiful hedgerows between the beds. The monitors hummed with a steadiness that pretended at mercy. Miriam's palm, so small in mine now, was warm at the center, cool at the edges, as though it had already started to keep 2 times, the urgent clock of the ward in some slower, tidal measure I could not follow. "Don't go," she said. I had not meant to move. Not yet. "I'm here." Her mouth skewed into that brave, lopsided smile which had always made me want to put my coat round her shoulders even in high summer. "Tell me a story," she whispered, "the one from our wedding night, the leaf." It was like her to ask for something that refused to spare. I nodded because it was easier than speaking. She knew I cried badly, no, not badly, awkwardly, like a man who has been taught the wrong steps to the right dance and cannot quite unlearn them. All my life I had believed in standing still through weather. I had made a creed of it. A man should be a wall between the world and the people he loves, but it is difficult to be a wall in the intensive care unit. Walls are built to last. I was built to break. Outside the tall window, September rain, thin and patient, drew faint ladders down the glass. A nurse adjusted a tap. Somewhere behind the curtains, a new voice moaned and subsided. The ward clock fidgeted its way along. I bent closer to Miriam's ear. "Once," I began, "there was a leaf who did not know how to stay." Her lashes trembled. "Go on," she breathed. And I was back inside that other room, our first room, which was all ours mostly because no one else would have wanted it. It sat above a greengrocer's on a narrow street in Finchley where the buses sighed and the shop bell chimed each time patients entered and Hope left with a paper bag of apples. The wallpaper bloomed with forget-me-nots that somebody had forgotten, and the carpet sprang with a moss that no one had planted. We had married that afternoon in the registry office on Ballard's Lane. 4 friends stood witness, 2 of mine and 2 of hers. Between them they had knitted together the whole thing with laughter and a pen that kept going dry. Her parents did not come. They were not unkind people. They were careful people. Her mother's voice over the phone had been full of wool, warm and itching. We had hoped, she said, for church and choir, for lilies and for time, and for something else. Something else meant someone else. I was a mechanic's son who had grown up counting every pound twice, once with the hand, once with the heart. Miriam was the vicar's eldest, quick with Greek and the Gospels, a remembered soloist from Christmas Eve. She shared a face with a long line of English girls who have fallen gloriously from bicycles on village greens, laughing as they rose. The parish had expected her to marry compromise in a nice suit. Instead, she chose me, a man with oil under his nails and a certainty under his ribs that looked like love. After the signatures, our friends took us to a Chinese restaurant with red lanterns and paper fish swimming across the ceiling in an orderly migration. We made a feast from steaming bowls of noodles and from the astonishment of finding ourselves exactly where we'd planned to be all along. The waitress brought an extra plate of dumplings with a secretive smile. We ate those, too. Later, back at the flat, our friends battered the door with their terrible jokes and fled down the stairs in a rattle of hilarity that made the banisters shake. When I shut the door, when it was only us in the humming quiet, Miriam did something so ceremonious that I both wanted to laugh and could not. She stood, drew the borrowed veil forward so that it shadowed her eyes, and knelt to touch my shoes with her fingertips. Then she rose, and I kissed the place in her hair that smelled faintly of pears. We were foolish and we were sovereign. We were very young. "Come," she said, "let's see our balcony." "We don't have a balcony," I said. "Then carry me to the window and we'll pretend." She put her feet on mine and we shuffled there together, one slow, tumbling creature, laughing until we had no breath left, until we were forced to rest against the sill. I remember the street lamp glaze upon her cheek. I remember how the pains caught us twice, ourselves within ourselves, and how she said, quieting, "Tell me a story I've never heard." I told her about the leaf. I had not planned it. It simply arrived already whole. Like a late visitor, the wind is determined to push indoors. Once, I said, there was a leaf who did not know how to stay. It had grown on the dark side of a broad oak in a small English town where the cricket square is lopsided and the ducks prefer the baker's yard to the pond. The leaf, let's call it rogue, had a habit of turning its face to any weather that would speak to it. It flirted with dawns. It befriended rain. When September arrived with its box of small golds, Rogue loosened its hold, but not enough to fall. It wanted to fly, but only as a surprise to itself, the way some people marry. I stopped there at our window because Miriam's eyes had filled and I was a man poorly taught in how to witness that. She put her head on my shoulder and said simply, "Of course the leaf flew. Don't you dare leave it stuck there forever." So I finished the story and she laughed again and kissed me, and the moon, worn to a bitten coin, astonished us by being exactly the right size for our sky. Now, years later, on a bed where the sheets were too clean to belong to anyone, she asked for Rogue, so I gave her Rogue. "You remember the day of the fair when the wind came up from the river," I said. "The bunting flipped itself into knots. The candy floss carts trembled on their wheels. The leaf lost its last grip and sprang into the air. It did not drop, it sailed, a wafer of hope, a small brown vow across the green and over the low wall and across the road and into the churchyard where the stones leaned together like old men listening. And beyond the churchyard was the pond. It was not a fine pond by any generous imagination. The pond was the sort that is full of a particular English melancholy, too shallow for swimming, too respectable for frogs, carefully encircled by a chain to keep children from the filthy redemption that comes of wading. But on that day the surface was black glass, and the wind, having finished its boasting, laid itself down for a sleep. Rogue struck the water, winced, and found that it could not drown. It floated, Miriam said, the word hardly more than breath. Her fingers tightened around mine. It always floats. It floated, I agreed, and then it saw her. Here I let myself remember the exact measure of Miriam's face on a mild day by the river years ago, before there was a ring or a flat or the notion of a child. I let myself recall how she can look when she thinks no one is looking, not sweet, not solemn, but undistracted. It is a look the English countryside sometimes wears in high summer, when the cows have arranged themselves with grave ceremony beneath a tree and the hedges are singing with unseen things. She was sitting with her shoes off, I told the woman lying small beside me. Her toes were painted the color of late cherries. She had a book open on her lap, though she was not reading. There was wind in her hair. There was a kindness about her that was not trying to prove anything. The leaf thought, I will stay here. I will stay wherever this person is. The leaf stayed. Weeks passed. The fair folded up its tent poles and took its bafflements home. The schoolchildren trod out a path from the gate to the newsagents and back again. The vicar practiced Advent hymns in an empty church. The ducks decided collectively to be somewhere else. Cold walked on the pond each morning in thin-soled shoes that hardly left a print. The leaf learned the grammar of ripples and the etiquette of rain. Sometimes the girl came. She would stand on the bank and stare at the water and then look up, as if accepting that, for today, the sky would have to do. The leaf admired the quietness of her not speaking. Did she notice it? Miriam asked, and the monitor found a tempo that was almost light. Yes, I said, one day she did. She leaned down and with one finger pulled the leaf to shore. She lifted it out. It made a sound like a sigh because all the little waters ran out of it at once. She laughed, a low sound, like a promise one intends to keep, and set it on her book to dry. You've had an adventure, she told it. You can't stay on the pond forever, you know. And the leaf thought, watch me. Stubborn, Miriam murmured, like someone I love. The nurse came then with her tray of kindnesses, and half the curtain hissed aside. She checked numbers that did not know how to comfort anyone, and when she had gone the ward was briefly less itself, the rain louder, the clock more honest. A doctor came later. He was younger than us and wore his apology like a school tie, neatly knotted, inescapable. I listened and did not listen. When he left, I decided what I already knew. I would not bring our son to the hospital to watch the clean men and women do an honest job at the worst thing. I won't have him remember the beeps, I said. I know, even now, even here, she was a woman who did not require me to explain myself twice. Tell me the rest. So I told her how the girl lifted the dry leaf, a little stiff now, a little weary, and slid it between the pages of the book as into a safe bed. The book was a poetry anthology with a cracked spine and a sentimental predisposition toward one poet in particular. There are 1,000 such books in 1,000 English homes. Years flitted past. The girl moved flats. She took the book with her. She dated men who wore good shoes. She left those men with their shoes still shining. She learned how to cook lamb badly. She learned how not to serve it. She was brave in ways that do not make stories feel proud and are therefore the bravest kinds of bravery. The leaf endured, the spine enduring around it, autumn inside summer, summer inside fear. And then one day, I said, she took the book down again, not looking for poems at all. She turned pages with habitual care, and there it was, the leaf, a little less itself and yet entirely itself, as if time were a solvent that takes away only what you never needed. She laughed again, that same sound, and thought, there you are, you stayed. Promise me, Miriam said, more air than word. She was staring at the ceiling, which did not deserve such attention, and accepted it anyway. Promise me you'll keep going. Promise me you'll stay. I did not say don't. I did not say if I could pull you back by sheer temper I would. I said I promise. This is how the story ends, because it must end, because every story worth telling knows where to bow. The girl took the book to the pond. She had meant to read. Instead, she stood by the water, breathing the tin and mint smell that all English ponds share in a proportion only a childhood can name. She opened the anthology and with 2 fingers, gentle, almost apologetic, she freed the leaf. For a moment it did not understand. It had learned so well the art of being kept that liberty shocked it. Then the wind spoke, very low. The leaf trembled and fell and found the water. It floated. Of course it floated. Where did it go? Miriam asked. Her pupils were dark lakes now, and her mouth had relaxed into the shape of a prayer half remembered. It went to the middle, I said, where the sky is closest. And then a boy came running with his father. The boy had found a treasure, a stick with a crook, and he let it sink and fished it out again because that is how joy is practiced. The father pointed, "There, do you see?" And the boy laughed and named the leaf Captain. He pushed Captain toward the island of reeds with the crook and then used the stick as a mast, and for a few minutes the boat was real. It is an underrated miracle, the kind you can still see on a Tuesday in England if you happen to pass a pond at the right hour. And when they went, the water remembered the shape of the game for a while, which is all anyone can ask of a place. In the ward, the machines went on being polite. Miriam blinked very slowly, like someone letting go of a question. "You're tired," I said. "Finish it," she said. She could not help smiling even now. "You always leave your endings in the middle of the room." I put my mouth to her temple. All right, years later the girl, who had not married compromise in a nice suit, comes back to the pond on a day when Autumn's hand is steady. The boy is there again, bigger now, and there is a man whose scarred knuckles say that he has worked and whose eyes say that he has prayed, though he would not put it that way. The girl, no longer a girl, watches them choose a leaf and send it sailing. She knows then that to stay is not to cling to one shape. The leaf that floats is the same leaf that once lay between pages. It is also the tree and the shade and the air that tastes of apples. So she picks up a fallen acorn, presses it into the wet bank, and goes home. In spring a sapling appears. In 10 years the sapling is a shade. In 20 it is a roof over lovers, who look up through its green and make promises they will half keep and wholly mean. Miriam laughed very softly, sentimental. "True," I said. "Which is why you'll tell it to him," she murmured. "Tell our boy, on birthdays and bad days, and when he first breaks something important, tell him the leaf stayed." I held her hand until the pulse in the middle found its other country. I sat still through the busy kindness of the nurses, through the slow solemnity that follows work well done and loss unprevented. I did the ringing of phones and the speaking of words that cannot carry what they must carry. I walked home under a sky that could not decide which of its grays to be, through a London evening full of buses and silent people. The street lamps performed their manners. A fox went by with purpose. Later I placed a chair by the window where we had once invented a balcony, and I sat with our 6-year-old in my lap. He had not learned to be suspicious of tears. He had cried himself to sleep and then woken to watch me, as if my face were a program and he did not wish to miss the end. I kissed the crown of his head, which still smelled of the shampoo with the whale on it. For a time we listened to the bus's sigh. Then, as the lights of the greengrocer below flicked off, I told him about a leaf. He interrupted, because that is the work of boys. "Is it a conker leaf or a maple?" "A maple," I said, after considering whether it mattered and deciding that it did. "Does it get lost?" "It gets found," I said. "Does it sink?" "It floats," I said. "Of course it floats." He rested his head against my chest in a way that promised temporary peace. When he slept again, I stood and went to the cupboard where Miriam kept the cookbooks and the things you only need twice a year. The anthology waited there with its cracked spine. I opened it and found, not our leaf, that fate belonged to the story, but a faint brown silhouette on page 67, a stain in the shape of patience. I closed the book and thought of the pond, the chain around it, the tidy Englishness of the place that had contained so much happiness, so much practice of loss. I thought of Miriam above a row of apples, inventing a balcony. I thought of the boy downstairs with his new red shoes and his old grief. We went to the pond the next Sunday after church, because grief respects liturgy even when the grieving do not. It was the sort of morning England excels at, clear enough to promise nothing, cool enough to be honest. He wore his school coat with the rip I hadn't mended. I wore the suit Miriam liked because it made me look like a man who would get the job. We stood by the chain. On the island of reeds, a moorhen practiced the violin. I chose a leaf from the ground and considered it. My son frowned, already his mother's child. "Not that one, that one's tired." "Then choose," I said. He did. He picked a leaf with a stem long as a thought and a body the color of toast. He set it on the water with both hands, reverent as a curate, and it rode out from the bank with an air of self-awareness I envied. He crouched to watch it go. The crookstick lay near the bench, waiting, as though a boy's fidelity could be trusted to run in straight lines from one year to the next. "Tell me again," he said. "Tell me the part about when it learns to stay." So I told him and will tell him again. I tell it on birthdays and bad days and on the sudden Tuesdays when sorrow walks in without knocking. And every autumn, because we are English and because some rituals do not need our belief to justify themselves, we come to the pond and choose a leaf and set it sailing, and we watch it until it is only a speck on the skin of the water, and we say nothing for a while. If there are people on the bench, we let them hear and be part of it. If there are ducks, we let them spoil the ending. There are things that can be mended and things that cannot. The rent in my son's coat can be sewn, the other tear must be carried. I have learned to be a wall that breathes. On the nights when the house is most hers, when the pear scent finds me from a place I will not name, I open the anthology and see the fragile ghost of that pressed leaf and think of the acorn we pushed into the mud in our story. I imagine its shade laid out like a cloth over a summer day. I imagine a girl at a window and a boy with a crook and a man who finally learned that to stay is not always to hold on. There will be a day when he is older and furious. He will fling the leaf into the pond as if to punish it for floating when so much else sank. He will love someone who cannot or will not love him back. He will say that stories are lies we tell to gild the unbearable. He will test every door in the world. When he is done, he will come back. He will stand at the chain and look at the water, and the pond will misremember him as a child. It cannot help it. Perhaps he will reach down then and retrieve some poor battered thing, leaf or stick or memory, and smooth it on his knee and carry it home in a pocket where it will turn to paper dust. Perhaps he will show it to his own child, and perhaps he will not. The miracle does not ask to be noticed, it only asks to be allowed. Meanwhile, there is today and the slow, domestic work of remaking a life to fit the furniture. I pack lunches. I write notes to the school. I buy mushrooms I will not cook properly. I practice the voice you use when you do not want a child to think you're worried. In the night sometimes I wake and mistake the radiators tapping for Miriam's bare feet on the floorboards. Then I lie still and thank a God I am not sure I believe in for the kind of love that does not ask me to be sure. And when the rain sets itself down the glass, drawing faint ladders I cannot climb, I say the old beginnings aloud. Once there was a leaf. Once there was a woman whose hand held the warmth at the center and the cool at the edges. Once there was a man who learned that his promise to shield the people he loved did not include shielding them from being loved by time. The leaf stayed, the man stayed, love stayed, though it changed address and surname and became something you breathe. On the pond, a moorhen starts again, tuning its stubborn instrument. Somewhere in the trees, a child laughs. The water remembers us better than we deserve. And on certain evenings when the wind lifts itself out of its chair, if you happen to be passing that place, you might see a leaf, a small brown vow, set out toward the middle as if the sky were closer there. If you look long enough, you will think you can see it turn. You will be right.